My name is Marco, 28 years old, and I just made the biggest financial mistake of my life. $325,000 to save my childhood home. I thought I was protecting my legacy, helping the people who raised me. Instead, I learned the harshest lesson about family betrayal. When I handed over that check, my mother cried grateful tears. The next morning they were gone. The house was empty. All that remained was a note, and my name on a deed they tried to sell behind my back. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it. This story might save you from the same heartbreak I experienced. Growing up in our Seattle suburban home was the definition of stability for me. The two-story colonial with the red door and white picket fence wasn't just a house. It was where I learned to ride my bike in the driveway, where I built my first computer in the basement, and where my mother would ring the ported dinner bell every night at 6 sharp. My room had glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that my father helped me place to form actual constellations. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. My parents, Robert and Linda, were hard-working middle-class people. Dad owned a small printing business, and Mom worked as an administrative assistant at the local high school. They instilled in me and my older sister Sophia the values of education, hard work, and family loyalty. Family always comes first. That was practically our motto. Every Sunday night was family dinner, no exceptions. Even when Sophia moved to Chicago after marrying her college sweetheart, she would call in to join us virtually. When I showed an aptitude for computers in high school, my parents scraped together enough money to buy me my first decent laptop. They didn't understand my fascination with coding, but they supported it wholeheartedly. "Whatever makes you happy, son," my dad would say, ruffling my hair. That support paid off when I got accepted to the University of Washington on a partial scholarship to study computer science. College wasn't easy financially. My parents contributed what they could, but I worked part-time jobs and took out some student loans to cover the rest. I lived at home to save on housing costs, commuting an hour each way to campus. Watching my parents stretch their budget to help with my education made me determined to succeed. I studied harder than anyone in my classes, often coding through the night in my childhood bedroom. After graduation, my career took off quickly. I landed a job at a promising tech startup in Seattle, developing cloud security solutions. My starting salary was modest, but within 3 years I had received 2 significant promotions. By 26, I was leading a development team and earning 6 figures. The financial discipline I learned from my parents served me well. I lived below my means, invested wisely, and built up substantial savings. I finally moved out of my parents' house at 25, renting a modern apartment in Seattle's South Lake Union district close to the tech hub. Though I lived on my own, I still drove out to the suburbs every Sunday for family dinner. My success became a point of pride for my parents, who would brag about their son, the tech genius, to neighbors and friends. "Marco is going places," my dad would say, clapping me on the shoulder. "First one in the family to go to college, and now look at him." Meanwhile, my parents' financial situation seemed to stagnate. Dad's printing business was struggling in the increasingly digital world, and Mom's school district had been cutting back on administrative staff. They never complained, but I noticed small signs. The roof that needed replacing, the 15-year-old car they kept repairing, instead of replacing the way they would talk about waiting for sales before buying necessities. Looking back, there were subtle warning signs I completely missed. The casual questions about my savings and investments, the comments about how property values in their neighborhood were soaring, the increasing frequency of stories about friends who were downsizing or moving to warmer climates for retirement. "You know, the Andersons sold their house for nearly double what they paid for it," my mother mentioned during one Sunday dinner. "They bought that lovely condo in Florida, right on the beach." "Sounds nice," I had replied, not thinking much of it. "It does, doesn't it?" My father exchanged a glance with my mother that I didn't understand at the time. About 6 months ago, I received a text from my mother that seemed urgent. "Marco, sweetie, can you come over for dinner tonight? We need to discuss something important with you. Family matter." It was a Tuesday, not our usual family dinner night, which immediately concerned me. I texted back that I'd be there after work, wondering what could be so important. Little did I know that dinner would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter my trust and change my life forever. When I arrived at my parents' house that Tuesday evening, something felt off immediately. The usually warm atmosphere was thick with tension. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, her special lasagna with garlic bread, which was another red flag. In our family, favorite meals were reserved for birthdays, celebrations, or when difficult conversations needed to happen. My father sat at the head of the dining table, uncharacteristically quiet. He usually greeted me with a bear hug and a barrage of questions about work, but that night he simply nodded and asked if I wanted a beer. My mother fluttered around, nervously checking the oven too many times and avoiding eye contact. "So what's this important family matter?" I asked after we had settled at the table. The lasagna sat untouched between us. My parents exchanged a look I'd seen many times before, the silent communication of a couple who had been together for decades. My father cleared his throat. "Son, we're in trouble," he began, his voice unsteady. "Financial trouble." My mother reached for his hand, her eyes already glistening with tears. "The house, Marco. We're going to lose the house." The words hit me like a physical blow. This house wasn't just property. It was our family's anchor. My father explained in halting sentences that they were 6 months behind on mortgage payments. The bank had sent a final notice. They had 30 days to pay the arrears in full or foreclosure proceedings would begin. How much, I asked, my mind already calculating my savings. $325,000, my father said, looking down at his plate. I nearly choked. That's a lot more than 6 months of mortgage payments. More painful details emerged as dinner grew cold. The mortgage had been refinanced multiple times. They had taken out a home equity line of credit years ago to help Dad's struggling business. Medical bills had piled up after my mother's knee surgery 2 years prior. Complications had kept her out of work longer than expected, and their insurance hadn't covered everything. Their credit cards were maxed out. They had even borrowed from their retirement accounts and faced penalties. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, struggling to keep the accusation out of my voice. "We were embarrassed," my mother admitted. "We thought we could fix it ourselves. Your father took on extra consulting work. I picked up evening shifts at the school's administrative office. But it just wasn't enough." "We didn't want to burden you," my father added. "You worked so hard to get where you are. It's not your responsibility to bail out your old parents." But it felt like my responsibility. This was my childhood home, the place that held all our memories. And these were my parents who had sacrificed so much for me. The next day at work, I was distracted, running calculations in my head. $325,000 would take nearly all of my savings. The money I had been putting away for my own future home, for eventual marriage and children, for security. I had been so proud of that nest egg built through years of careful saving and smart investing. During lunch, I confided in my friend and colleague Jason. "That's a huge amount of money, Marco," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Are you sure about this? Have you verified all the details?" I hadn't, I realized. In my emotional response to my parents' distress, I hadn't asked to see the foreclosure notice or any documentation. That evening, I did my homework. I researched the property's value, easily worth over $800,000 in the current Seattle market. I asked my parents to send me copies of the mortgage statements, the foreclosure notice, and their other debts. The numbers matched what they had told me, though seeing the documentation made the situation even more real. Jason's warning still echoed in my head. "Be careful mixing family and money. It changes relationships. Get everything in writing." I called my sister Sophia in Chicago to discuss the situation. She was shocked but not entirely surprised. "They've been struggling for years," she said. "They never wanted to worry us." "But Marco, that's your savings. Are you sure?" "What choice do I have, Soph? Let them lose the house." "Maybe they could sell it themselves," she suggested. "Downsize to something more manageable." "They don't have time for a proper sale," I countered. "And you know how much that house means to them, to all of us." After 3 days of deliberation, I made my decision. I would help my parents save their home, our home, but I would protect myself too. I would insist on having my name added to the deed in exchange for paying off their debt. It seemed like a reasonable precaution while still being generous. After all, eventually the house would be part of my inheritance anyway. I called my parents and told them I would help explaining my condition about the deed. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You want us to put your name on the house?" my father asked, his tone unreadable. "It's just protection, Dad. $325,000 is almost everything I have. This way we all have security." Another pause, longer this time. Then my mother's voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you comfortable. We're just so grateful for your help." Little did I know that this conversation was the beginning of the end, and that their apparent hesitation held more meaning than I could have imagined. 2 days later, I met my parents at their attorney's office, a small practice in a converted Victorian house near downtown. The attorney, Gerald Thompson, was a silver-haired man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He had apparently been my parents' lawyer for years, though I'd never heard them mention him before. "So generous of you to help your parents this way," Thompson said as we sat around a polished conference table. "Family taking care of family. It's heartwarming." I nodded but stayed focused. "I'd like to go through exactly how this will work. I'm paying $325,000 to clear their debt with the bank, and in exchange my name will be added to the property deed as a co-owner." Thompson glanced at my parents before responding. "Yes, that's the arrangement as I understand it. We'll prepare a quitclaim deed, adding you as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. That means you'll have equal ownership interest in the property, along with your parents." "And if they wanted to sell the house in the future?" I asked. "They would need your consent, of course," Thompson confirmed. "All 3 owners would have to agree to any sale or further encumbrance of the property." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Son, is all this really necessary? We're not planning to sell. This is our home." "It's just due diligence, Dad," I explained. $325,000 is a lot of money. I'm happy to help, but I need to protect myself too." My mother reached over and patted my hand. "We understand, sweetie. You're being smart. Your father and I are just so grateful. We never expected such generosity." Thompson cleared his throat. "If everyone's comfortable with the terms, I'll draw up the paperwork. We can meet at the bank tomorrow to handle the transaction and file the new deed afterward." I nodded, relief washing over me. The plan felt solid, reasonable. I was helping my family while ensuring my financial contribution was protected. The next morning, we met at the bank. I had transferred the funds from my investment accounts to my checking account, taking the penalty hit on some not yet matured investments. The bank manager welcomed us into her office, and I signed the cashier's check for $325,000 to pay off my parents' debt. As the transaction was processed, my mother began to cry. Not small, delicate tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs. She clutched my arm, repeating, thank you," between breaths. My father, usually so stoic, had tears in his eyes too. He wrapped me in a bear hug that nearly crushed my ribs. "You're a good son, Marco," he whispered in my ear. "The best a father could ask for." Their emotional reaction touched me deeply. This was what family was about, supporting each other through hard times. Any doubts I had harbored melted away in the face of their genuine gratitude. After the bank, we went directly to the county records office to file the new deed with my name on it. Thompson had prepared all the paperwork and the process went smoothly. By early afternoon, it was official. I was now a one-third owner of my childhood home. To celebrate, my parents insisted on taking me to dinner at Anthony's, an upscale seafood restaurant on the waterfront that we normally reserved for special occasions like milestone birthdays. My father ordered a bottle of champagne, an extravagance I'd rarely seen from him. To family, he toasted, raising his glass, and to our Marco, who saved our home. My mother had composed herself by then, but still looked at me with such raw gratitude that it almost made me uncomfortable. "I don't know what we would have done without you," she said. "That house holds all our memories." "It's our family home," I replied. "I couldn't let it go either." The evening felt perfect, warm, loving the way family should be. We reminisced about my childhood, Sophia's rebellious teenage years, family vacations at the Oregon coast. My parents seemed lighter than they had in months. The burden of financial stress lifted from their shoulders. When my phone rang, and I saw it was Sophia, I put her on speaker so she could join our celebration. "You did a wonderful thing, Marco," she said, her voice slightly tinny through the phone speaker. "Mom, Dad, you raised an amazing son." "We know," my father replied, raising his glass again. "To both our children, we're the luckiest parents alive." After dinner, my parents hugged me tightly in the restaurant parking lot. "Come over for breakfast this weekend," my mother said. "I'll make those blueberry pancakes you love." "Sounds perfect," I agreed. "I need to check on that loose gutter too. Maybe we can finally get around to fixing it." As I drove back to my apartment that night, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Yes, my savings had taken a massive hit, but I had protected our family legacy. The house where I had grown up would remain in our family. My parents could live out their retirement years in the home they loved, and someday perhaps I would raise my own family there. I fell asleep that night with a clear conscience and a full heart, utterly unaware that in less than 24 hours my world would come crashing down around me. I arrived at my parents' house around 10 the next morning, Saturday, dressed in old jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt, ready to tackle some overdue home repairs. I had stopped for coffee and brought my parents their favorites, a mocha for Mom and a dark roast for Dad. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. Both their cars were gone. The garage door, usually left open on weekends, was firmly closed. No big deal, I thought. Maybe they ran out for groceries. I used my key to unlock the front door, balancing the coffee tray in one hand. "Mom, Dad," I called out as I stepped inside. Silence greeted me, and something else: emptiness. Literal emptiness. The entryway console table, where my mother always kept family photos, was gone. I moved further into the house, a creeping sense of dread building with each step. The living room was stripped bare. No couch, no TV, no bookshelves. The spaces where furniture had stood for decades showed darker patches on the carpet. "What the hell?" I muttered, setting down the coffee and moving quickly through the house. The kitchen was eerily empty, cabinets standing open and bare. The dining room table and chairs, gone. Upstairs, my parents' bedroom was cleared out completely, their bathroom vanity emptied. The guest room where Sophia stayed when visiting, vacant. My old bedroom was the only room untouched, preserved like a museum exhibit, with my high school trophies still on the shelves, my old desk still against the wall. Back downstairs, disoriented and increasingly panicked, I finally noticed a white envelope on the kitchen counter. My name was written on it in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. With trembling hands, I tore it open. The note inside was brief. "Marco, we've decided to start fresh somewhere else. Your generosity gave us the freedom to move on to the next chapter of our lives. The house is yours now. You paid for it after all. Please don't try to contact us. We need this clean break. Take care of yourself. Mom and Dad." I read the note 3 times, unable to process the words. This couldn't be happening. Just last night we had celebrated together. My mother had invited me for breakfast. My father had hugged me and called me the best son a father could ask for. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to call them. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail. So did my father's. I called their work numbers with the same result. In desperation, I called Sophia. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad today?" I asked when she answered. "No, why? What's going on?" My voice broke as I explained what I had found. The empty house, the note, the disconnected phones. "That's impossible," Sophia gasped. "They wouldn't do that. Not after you just saved their house. There must be some explanation." But there was no explanation, at least none that made any sense. I sat on the floor of my empty childhood home, surrounded by the ghosts of furniture and memories, trying to understand how my parents could take my money and disappear overnight. I walked across the street to talk to the Hendersons, who had been our neighbors for 20 years. Mrs. Henderson opened the door in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. "Marco, what a surprise. Is everything okay? You look awful." "Mrs. Henderson, have you seen my parents today, or last night?" She frowned, concerned. "Well, yes. There was quite a commotion very early this morning. Moving trucks, 2 of them. I thought they might be delivering new furniture. Your father waved to my husband when he went out to get the newspaper, said something about a fresh start." "Moving trucks," I repeated numbly. "At what time?" Must have been around 5:30. Still dark out. My husband is an early riser. 5:30 in the morning. While I was sleeping soundly in my apartment believing I had saved our family home, my parents were loading up moving trucks with all their possessions. The timing was deliberate. They knew I would come over later to help with repairs. Back at the house, I began to look for any clue, any explanation. In the kitchen drawer where my mother kept important papers, I found a mail forwarding confirmation from the postal service. They had arranged for their mail to be forwarded to a P.O. box. Not even a residential address I could track. The form had been submitted online 3 weeks ago, well before they asked me for money. The utility disconnection notices showed the same pattern. Electricity, water, gas, all scheduled to be turned off in the coming week. The requests had been made days before our meeting at the bank. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was calculated, planned. They had intended to leave all along. They just wanted my money first. I sank down at the bottom of the stairs, my legs no longer able to support me. The betrayal was so complete, so unfathomable, that my mind struggled to accept it. My own parents had manipulated me, taken advantage of my love for them and my attachment to our family home. $325,000, gone. The money I had saved for years, my security, my future, all of it handed over to people who had planned to disappear the very next day. My phone rang. Sophia again. I got through to Mom's friend Patricia, she said without preamble. She wouldn't tell me much, but she confirmed they've been planning this move for months. Something about a condo in Florida. Florida. Like the Andersons, whom my mother had mentioned admiringly. Right on the beach. Did they really need the money? I asked, a new horrible thought occurring to me. Was there actually a foreclosure threat? Sophia was quiet for a moment. I don't know, Marco. I just don't know. As the day wore on, the shock gave way to a profound sense of betrayal that settled in my chest like a physical weight. My parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who had taught me about honesty and family loyalty, had orchestrated an elaborate deception to extract my life savings before abandoning me without so much as a goodbye. Night fell, and I remained in the empty house, sitting on the floor of my old bedroom. The only room they had left intact, perhaps out of some twisted sense of sentimentality. Or maybe they simply hadn't had room for my childhood furniture in their new beachfront condo. As I sat in the darkness, surrounded by the remnants of my youth, one thought provided a small measure of comfort. The house was legally 1/3 mine. My name was on the deed. Whatever game my parents were playing, they couldn't sell the house without my signature. Little did I know that they had already tried to do exactly that. The next morning, still reeling from the discovery, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. I couldn't face people, couldn't pretend everything was normal when my entire reality had been shattered. Instead, I began the process of trying to understand what had happened, and why. My first call was to a private investigator named Michael Reeves, whose firm specialized in locating people who didn't want to be found. I explained my situation, trying to keep my voice steady. So your parents took your money and disappeared. Reeves summarized bluntly. And you want me to find them? Yes. They must have left a trail somewhere. Credit card transactions, property records, something. People who plan disappearances this thoroughly usually cover their tracks, Reeves warned. But everyone makes mistakes. I'll need a retainer to start working. Another expense I hadn't planned for, but I had no choice. I needed answers. Next, I contacted Thompson, my parents' attorney, who claimed complete ignorance about their plans. I'm as shocked as you are, Marco, he insisted over the phone. I had no idea they were planning to leave. I simply handled the paperwork for adding your name to the deed as requested. Something in his tone didn't ring true, but I had no proof he was lying. I made an appointment to meet with him in person the next day. My third call was to my own bank, asking them to trace the money I had given my parents. The customer service representative explained that once a cashier's check is issued and cashed, the funds are no longer traceable through my account. I would need to work with the receiving bank, which would require a subpoena or my parents' permission. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting in my car outside my parents' bank, debating whether to go in and plead my case to the manager. My phone rang, Reeves, the private investigator, calling much sooner than I expected. "Mr. Delgado, I have some preliminary information for you," he said without preamble. "Your parents purchased a property 3 weeks ago in Naples, Florida, a luxury condo in a gated community called Pelican Bay. Purchase price $690,000. My stomach lurched. $690,000. Where did they get that kind of money? Down payment was made with funds from several sources, including a wire transfer matching the amount you gave them, $325,000. They closed on the property yesterday morning. Yesterday morning, while I was discovering their empty house, they were signing papers for their new beachfront home using my money. There's more," Reeves continued. "They appear to be working with someone named Dennis Keller. He's a real estate developer based in Seattle. Does that name mean anything to you?" It didn't, but a quick internet search revealed that Dennis Keller was a developer known for buying older homes in established neighborhoods, tearing them down and building luxury duplexes. His company, Keller Development, had transformed several suburban Seattle neighborhoods over the past decade. Why would my parents be working with a developer, I wondered aloud. "I can't answer that yet," Reeves replied, "but I found communications between your father and Keller dating back 6 months. They've met several times." The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. I thanked Reeves and promised to transfer additional funds for him to continue his investigation. My next step was to visit the county records office where I had been just 2 days earlier to add my name to the deed. The clerk, a different one from before, helped me pull up the property records for my parents' address. "That's odd," she said, frowning at her screen. "There's a pending sale agreement on this property submitted yesterday." "A sale agreement," I echoed, leaning forward to see her screen. "That's impossible. I'm a co-owner, and I never agreed to sell." She turned the monitor so I could see better. There it was, a sale agreement between my parents and Keller Development, dated the day after I had added my name to the deed. The sale price, $1,200,000. "But this can't be valid," I protested. "I own 1/3 of the property. They can't sell without my consent." The clerk studied the document more carefully. "You're right. There are only 2 signatures here, Robert and Linda Delgado. If you're also on the deed as you say, they can't complete this sale without your signature." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by renewed anger. They had tried to sell the house right out from under me, apparently assuming I wouldn't check the property records. Armed with copies of all the relevant documents, I met with a real estate attorney the following morning. One I found myself not my parents' lawyer. Jennifer Patel listened to my story with growing concern. "They committed fraud," she said flatly when I finished. "They represented that they could sell the property when they couldn't. And based on what your investigator found, it appears they used your money as a down payment on another property, potentially under false pretenses. What can I do? First, we file an affidavit with the county alerting them to the fraudulent sale attempt. Then we notify Keller Development that the sale agreement is invalid. Finally, we can pursue civil and potentially criminal charges against your parents for fraud." The thought of filing charges against my own parents made me physically ill, but I nodded. "What about the house itself?" "It's 1/3 yours legally. They can't sell it without your consent. But I'm concerned about this developer Keller. If he's worked with your parents for months, there may be more to this story." Jennifer's intuition proved correct. The following day, Reeves called with another update. "I've found communications between your father and Keller going back nearly a year," he reported. "It appears they had an agreement. Keller wanted to buy your parents' property to build luxury duplexes. The offer was contingent on delivering a clean title with no liens or encumbrances. The mortgage, I realized. They couldn't sell because of the mortgage debt." "Exactly. They needed to clear the debt to complete the sale to Keller. Based on the timeline, they approached you for money after their attempts to secure other financing failed. The full scope of their deception was now clear. My parents had planned to sell our family home to a developer who would tear it down. They needed my money to clear the mortgage so they could complete the sale. The $325,000 I had given them, combined with the proceeds from the planned sale to Keller, would fund their luxurious retirement in Florida. They had never intended to stay in the house. The tears, the gratitude, the family dinner, all of it had been theater designed to extract money from their son. Later that day, I finally managed to get through to my father's phone. To my surprise, he answered, "Marco." His voice was cool, controlled, not the voice of a man who had betrayed his son and fled with his money. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "You lied to me. You took my money and tried to sell the house." "We didn't lie," he countered. "We needed the money to pay off the mortgage, and we used it for exactly that. What we did afterward with our property was our business." "Our property," I repeated incredulously. "My name is on the deed. I paid for 1/3 of that house." A pause. "That was an unfortunate complication. We didn't expect you to insist on that condition." "Unfortunate complication?" I could barely speak through my anger. "You were planning to sell to Keller all along. You knew you were leaving. You manipulated me, took my life savings, and disappeared." "It was business, Marco. An opportunity. We're getting older, and we needed to secure our retirement. The Florida property was too good to pass up." "Business," I echoed. "I'm your son, not a business partner you can defraud." "No one defrauded you," he said coldly. "You have what you paid for, your name on the deed of the house. We never promised to stay there." The conversation continued in this vein, my father neither apologizing nor acknowledging any wrongdoing. My mother never came to the phone. When I asked about her, my father simply said she was adjusting to our new life and didn't need the stress of speaking with me. By the end of the call, one thing was crystal clear: the parents I thought I had, loving, honest, family-oriented, had never existed. Or perhaps they had once, but greed and self-interest had transformed them into people I no longer recognized. My sister Sophia was as devastated as I was. "I can't believe they would do this to you," she said during one of our many long phone calls. "To any of us. Have they tried to contact you again?" "No," I admitted, "and I don't think they will. They've made their choice. Florida, their new life, their retirement, all of it was more important to them than family." "What will you do about the house?" Sophia asked. It was a question I had been pondering for days. The house that had once held all our family memories now felt tainted, poisoned by betrayal. Yet it was also an asset, a valuable piece of property that legally belonged in part to me. "I'm not sure yet," I told her, "but whatever I decide, it will be on my terms, not theirs." The following week was a whirlwind of legal consultations and strategic planning. Jennifer Patel, my real estate attorney, had successfully filed the affidavit blocking any sale of the property without my consent. Keller Development, however, was not going down without a fight. Dennis Keller himself called me directly, his voice smooth and practiced, the voice of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Marco, I understand there's been a misunderstanding with your parents regarding the property on Maple Street." He began as if we were discussing a minor scheduling conflict rather than fraud. "No misunderstanding," I replied coolly. "They tried to sell you property they don't fully own. I never consented to any sale." "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement," Keller suggested. "The property is extremely valuable for development. I'd be willing to make it worth your while to sign off on the sale." "How much are we talking about?" I asked, curious about what he considered worth my while. "I could offer you $100,000 for your cooperation. Cash immediately. $100,000 for a property worth over $1 million. He was trying to lowball me, assuming I was as easily manipulated as my parents thought I was. "Not interested," I said flatly. "200,000 then," he countered quickly. "Final offer." "Mr. Keller, I'm not selling. Not to you, not to anyone. That property is partially mine and I intend to keep it." His tone changed, warmth giving way to steel. "Your parents already committed to this sale. We have plans, permits in process. You're obstructing a legitimate business transaction." "A transaction based on fraud," I reminded him. "Did you know they used my money to clear the mortgage money they obtained under false pretenses?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Then, that's between you and your parents. My agreement was with them. An agreement they can't fulfill without my consent, which they will never get. Goodbye, Mr. Keller." I hung up feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Standing up to Keller felt good, a small act of defiance in a situation where I'd been a victim. But the fact that I had to do so at all, that my own parents had put me in this position, still cut deep. The next day, Jennifer called with news. Keller is threatening to sue your parents for breach of contract. He claims they represented that they could deliver clear title to the property. How does that affect me? It doesn't directly, but it puts pressure on your parents, which might make them more willing to negotiate with you. They're facing significant liability if Keller sues. True to Jennifer's prediction, my father called that evening. "This has gone too far, Marco," he said, his voice tense. "Keller is threatening to sue us for everything we have. You need to sign off on the sale." "No," I said simply. "Be reasonable. This was a business opportunity for everyone. You can still get a good cut of the proceeds." "It's not about money anymore, Dad. It's about trust. You broke that trust completely." "We're your parents," he said, as if that fact alone entitled them to my compliance. "Parents don't steal from their children," I replied. "Parents don't manipulate and lie and disappear in the night." "We did what we had to do," he insisted, "for our future. And I'm doing what I have to do, for mine." After hanging up, I called Jennifer to discuss next steps. "I want to take control of this situation," I told her. "They thought they could use me, then discard me. I want to show them they were wrong." Jennifer helped me develop a plan. Since I legally owned 1/3 of the property, and my parents had abandoned it, I had grounds to petition for partition, a legal process where a court can order the property sold and proceeds divided, or in some cases allow one owner to buy out the others. But I had a different idea. "What if I develop the property myself?" I asked Jennifer. "Develop it how?" "Not like Keller tearing down the house to build cookie-cutter duplexes. Something that preserves the character of the neighborhood but makes financial sense too." Jennifer was intrigued. "It would be complicated with shared ownership, but not impossible. We could try to force a buyout of your parents' share based on their abandonment and attempted fraudulent sale." Over the next few weeks, I worked with Jennifer and a local architect to develop a plan for the property. Instead of demolishing the family home, we would renovate it and add a small complementary structure at the back of the large lot, a separate one-bedroom home that could serve as a rental property or guest house. The design preserved the character of the original house while maximizing the property's potential. Dennis Keller was furious when he learned of my plans. He showed up at my office unannounced one afternoon, his face flushed with anger. "You're making a huge mistake," he warned. "Your little renovation project will never generate the returns that my development would. You're leaving money on the table out of spite." "It's not spite," I corrected him. "It's principle. And unlike you, I care about more than just maximum profit. That neighborhood doesn't need more luxury duplexes." "Your parents understand business," he snapped. "You're just an emotional kid playing with property you don't understand." His dismissive attitude only strengthened my resolve. "My parents understand deception, Mr. Keller. And I understand enough to know I don't want to do business with either you or them." As Keller's lawsuit against my parents proceeded, they became increasingly desperate. My mother finally called, her voice tearful and pleading. "Marco, sweetie, we never meant to hurt you," she said. "We thought you'd understand once we explained everything. It was a business decision." "A business decision you hid from me while taking my money," I pointed out. "You lied to my face, Mom. You cried grateful tears, then emptied the house the next morning." "We got carried away," she admitted. "The Florida opportunity came up suddenly and we had to act fast." Another lie. Reeves had documented their communications with Florida realtors going back months. "The property records show you bought the Florida condo 3 weeks before you asked me for money," I said. "You planned this all along." Silence on the line. Then her voice harder. "We deserve our retirement, Marco. After everything we did for you and Sophia growing up, is this how you repay us?" The conversation devolved from there, with my mother alternating between guilt trips, pleas, and veiled threats. When none of that worked, she finally resorted to an unexpected tactic. "Dennis Keller is offering us a deal," she said. "If we can deliver the property, he'll help us fight any fraud charges you might bring. His company has very good lawyers." "Are you threatening me, Mom?" "I'm trying to make you see reason," she insisted. "We can all still come out of this ahead financially if you just cooperate." I'm not signing anything, I told her firmly, and you should prepare yourselves for what's coming next. What came next was my formal legal petition to force a buyout of my parents' share of the property based on abandonment and attempted fraud. Jennifer warned me it would be an uphill battle. Courts generally prefer to order properties sold and proceeds divided, but we had strong evidence of my parents' misconduct. To strengthen my case, I secured financing to buy out their share at fair market value. The loan would be substantial, but with my job security and the potential rental income from the planned second structure, it was manageable. The judge assigned to the case, an older woman with a reputation for no-nonsense decisions, reviewed our filings with careful attention. After several hearings where my parents' attorney argued vehemently against the forced buyout, she issued her ruling. The court finds that the defendants Robert and Linda Delgado abandoned the property in question and attempted to fraudulently sell it without the consent of the co-owner, she wrote. Their actions demonstrate bad faith and a disregard for the plaintiff's legal rights as a property owner. Therefore, the court grants the plaintiff's petition for a forced buyout at fair market value to be determined by court-appointed appraisers. It was a significant victory, though not the end of the battle. The court-appointed appraisers valued the property at $850,000, meaning I would need to pay my parents 2/3 of that amount, minus the $325,000 I had already contributed. The final settlement required me to pay them an additional $241,666, money I would need to borrow further, stretching my finances, but it would be worth it. The property would be entirely mine, free of their claims and manipulations. When the buyout was complete, Dennis Keller made one final attempt to acquire the property, offering me significantly more than its appraised value. I declined. This isn't about money, I told him. It never was. My revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't in hurting my parents financially, though the legal fees and settlement with Keller had apparently taken a significant chunk of their Florida retirement fund. My revenge was in refusing to be the victim they had tried to make me, in standing up for myself and creating something positive from their betrayal. Construction began on the property renovation the following month. As I watched the contractors work transforming the house I had grown up in, while preserving its essential character, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for what I had lost, pride in what I was creating, and a growing sense of peace with my decision to fight for what was rightfully mine. The months following the legal settlement were among the most difficult of my life. Despite the victory in court, I struggled with a profound sense of loss. Not just the financial loss, though, that was substantial, but the loss of my family as I had known it, or thought I had known it. Depression settled over me like a heavy fog. I withdrew from friends, threw myself into work during the day, and spent evenings alone in my apartment, replaying conversations with my parents, looking for signs I had missed, warnings I had ignored. Sleep became elusive, and when it came, it was filled with dreams of empty houses and disappearing parents. Jason, my colleague and friend, noticed my deterioration and refused to let me isolate completely. He began showing up at my apartment with takeout food, insisting I join him for weekend activities, and generally being present without pushing me to talk unless I wanted to. "You don't have to go through this alone," he told me one evening as we sat on my balcony watching the Seattle skyline shimmer in the distance. "What your parents did was unforgivable, but it doesn't define you." Gradually, with Jason's support and weekly sessions with a therapist who specialized in family trauma, I began to emerge from the darkest places of my grief and betrayal. Meanwhile, the renovation of the property progressed steadily. I visited the site weekly, working closely with the architect and contractors to preserve the elements of the house that held positive memories, while transforming others to create something new. The separate one-bedroom structure at the back of the property took shape, modern but complementary to the main house. My sister Sophia flew in from Chicago to see the renovations about 6 months after they began. "It's beautiful, Marco," she said as we walked through the partially completed main house. "Different, but you can still feel the bones of our childhood home." That was the idea, I explained. To honor what was good about this place while making it mine. Sophia had maintained minimal contact with our parents, unlike me, who had cut off all communication after the settlement. "They ask about you," she said hesitantly. "Mom especially. I think they regret how things happened. They regret getting caught, I corrected her. They regret that their plan failed. That's not the same as regretting the betrayal itself. Sophia couldn't argue with that. I know. I just thought you should know they think about you. I think about them too, I admitted, but not in the way they probably hope. As the renovations neared completion, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would live in the smaller structure at the back of the property and rent out the main house. The main house still held too many memories, too much emotional baggage. The new structure represented a fresh start, connected to the past but distinct from it. 9 months after construction began, both buildings were complete. The main house, now modernized while retaining its classic character, quickly attracted a young family as tenants. A couple with 2 small children who loved the neighborhood and the school district, just as my parents had when they first bought the house decades ago. Watching those children play in the same backyard where I had played felt like closing a circle somehow. Their joy was untainted by betrayal or manipulation. It was pure as childhood should be. My new living space, though small, was perfectly designed for my needs. Open and airy with large windows and clean lines, it felt nothing like the house I had grown up in. This was intentional, a physical representation of my emotional separation from the past. The rental income from the main house, combined with my salary, allowed me to begin rebuilding my savings. The financial wound inflicted by my parents would take years to heal completely, but I was on my way. About a year after the renovation was complete, my parents tried to contact me again. A letter arrived at my office. They obviously didn't know my new address at the property. The envelope contained a check for $50,000 and a note. Marco, we hope this will begin to make amends for the pain we caused. We made a terrible mistake in how we handled everything. Florida isn't what we expected. We miss family. We miss you. Love, Mom and Dad. I tore up the check and the note. The gesture felt empty, too little, too late. $50,000 when they had taken $325,000. When they had tried to sell my childhood home from under me. When they had lied, manipulated, and abandoned me. It was almost insulting. Sophia called the next day. They told me they sent you money. Did you get it? I got it. I destroyed it. She sighed. I thought you might. They're really struggling, Marco. The condo association in Florida is a nightmare. They have regrets. Their regrets are not my problem, I said firmly. I've rebuilt my life without them. I'm doing well. And I was. The property investment had proven wise. Property values in the neighborhood continued to rise and the rental income was steady. At work, I had been promoted to senior development manager with a substantial salary increase. I had made new friends through a local hiking club, expanding my social circle beyond work colleagues. Most importantly, I had begun to trust again. Not blindly as I once had, but cautiously and with appropriate boundaries. I dated occasionally, though I was transparent about my trust issues with anyone who became important to me. My chosen family, Jason, new friends from the hiking club, neighbors, and of course Sophia, provided the support and connection I needed. They proved that family isn't always about blood relations. Sometimes it's about who shows up, who stays, who proves themselves trustworthy through actions rather than mere words. 2 years after my parents' betrayal, Dennis Keller's development company went bankrupt, following a series of lawsuits from homeowners in his developments over construction defects. The news gave me a certain satisfaction, though I took no joy in the suffering of the innocent homeowners affected. 3 years after the betrayal, I received word through Sophia that our father had suffered a heart attack. He survived, but the medical bills had devastated what remained of their savings. They had been forced to sell the Florida condo at a loss and move to a modest apartment. They're asking if they can come back to Seattle. Sophia told me hesitantly. They want to see you. I considered this for a long time before responding. I'm not ready, Sophia. Maybe someday, but not now. The wound is still too deep. She understood. I'll tell them. For what it's worth, I think they finally understand what they lost. Not just financially, but you, their son, their family. Perhaps they did understand finally. But understanding doesn't automatically earn forgiveness or trust. Those must be rebuilt slowly, painfully, if they can be rebuilt at all. Today, 5 years after my parents took my money and disappeared, I am in a good place. The property has appreciated significantly. I've expanded my real estate investments to include 2 additional properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods, applying the lessons I learned from my first forced entry into property ownership. I've established a scholarship fund for computer science students who come from challenging family backgrounds, giving back in a way that acknowledges my own journey while helping others avoid similar financial vulnerability. The most valuable lessons from this painful experience weren't about money or property, though. They were about self-worth, boundaries, and the true meaning of family. I learned that love without respect is meaningless, that family is defined by actions, not blood, that generosity should never come at the expense of self-protection, that trust once broken may never be fully restored, and that's okay. Most importantly, I learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can acknowledge the pain, learn from it, and build something new and beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. The house that was meant to be my inheritance became something much more valuable, a symbol of my resilience, my boundaries, and my refusal to be a victim. What my parents intended as exploitation became my strength. To those of you watching who have experienced betrayal by the people who should have protected you most, I want you to know that healing is possible. It doesn't happen overnight. It comes in small moments of joy, in new connections, in standing firm in your worth, even when those who should have valued you failed to do so. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a painful betrayal? What helped you heal? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into.